What is going on with the NIO stock price today? The stock price dropped to below $5. This is November 12th, 2024. It's Tuesday. Hang on. I got to share something. This is from yesterday's video. Stock price might be dependent on big money flowing back to Chinese stocks. The simplest indicator of that might be to watch Alibaba, ticker is BABA, as it remains sub $100. Hard to imagine NIO would rocket up outside of a short squeeze with such negative sentiment and price action continuing for most Chinese stocks. Now, this is what Alibaba looked like 30 minutes before the market opened. Do you see the big red candles indicating a lot of selling pressure? And not surprisingly, when we pull up the NIO chart, we see the same thing 30 minutes before the market opened. Big red candles, lots of selling pressure. And then if we move over and look at the FTDs, the fails to deliver, and those charts, because that was the other thing I pulled up. I was curious to see if we had updated data, and we do not yet. So I'll come back with a video and cover that when we do get it for NIO stock. It's crazy that Alibaba would even have fails to deliver, but you see the white lines representing fails to deliver. Even in the recent history, there continue to be not just a lot of the FTDs for Alibaba compared to where the stock price when it was much higher, was, and it's just, how does this not look like a correlation? I don't know how anyone could look at it and not see an apparent connection. But anyway, it's crazy for such a profitable company like Alibaba to be down sub $100 at this stage. They're going to have their earnings this week. So that's just one thing that I'll be watching. Again, simple indicator. If we move over to the NIO recent chart with the FTDs, again, the spiking FTDs, very elevated recently, much more of that sort of selling, perhaps predatory shorting going on. And that's just the reality. And on a day like today, where we are not even to 60 million shares traded, let's talk about a stock that does have a lot of interest and momentum, as Darius Dale, shout out to him, 42 Macro, dude's a beast with research. And one of the things he talks about is momentum and how important momentum is. And so you've got Tesla trading over $330 per share, and it has traded more shares today than NIO with a sub $5 price. So NIO, not with momentum. Tesla, lots of momentum. It's really kind of simple. Also, this is the fail to deliver chart for Tesla. And if we zoom out a little bit, what you'll notice is the only recent spike was just over 500,000 shares that could be located. That was reported in September. So, you've got to go back a couple years to see even elevated FTD levels for Tesla. So again, I have it on the ticker at the bottom of the screen for a reason. The short-term stock price indicators for me, at least what I use to kind of track things, are the trade volume, the FTDs, and sentiment. Sentiment, pretty clear that Chinese stocks are not in a favorable sentiment or momentum type of position especially versus something like a Tesla that does have a lot of positivity and momentum with it. And your trade volume, again, very different levels, which I think is an indicator of sentiment. Tesla, really big volume, and that stock price that's much higher than the other two that we've been talking about in this video. So, then the fail to deliver data, which again, they remain elevated, although this is lagged, delayed data. We never get to see it real time, but it's not hard to envision or imagine that there could be more elevated fails to deliver that we will see. They will get reported. And whenever we get those, I'll call it out. I'll do a video and we'll talk about it. How about the weekly data? Let's pivot now and talk a little bit about NIO with their numbers. 3,000 on the insurance registration side of things. That's from November 4th through the 10th. And then Onvo, the L60, 820 is the number that was reported here. I want to point something out for those who maybe haven't seen this or caught this. Thinker Card does a nice job of breaking things down and even separating those who are maybe closer, more in line as competitors. And so, for example, if we look at, they've got NIO and Zeekr together here. I thought that was interesting to point out. Also, they've got Mercedes, BMW, and Audi. So again, those are the brands that NIO is targeting, which they're still doing well, even though all of them, week over week anyway, their numbers were down quite a bit. So, maybe this is a bigger indicator of the premium segment slowing down right now in this time frame. This is a super short time frame. And if we go out and look at bigger picture, this is the playlist. By the way, this is the 100th video that I've done on the weekly insurance registration numbers. And one of the things I don't like to get too caught up in the weekly numbers. I just like to see if there are indicators we get from them. But lately, I've been trying to mix in other things like talking about today, the stock price or FTD data when we get in, that sort of thing. But big picture overview, if you step back, and I actually looked this up and responded to a comment with this the other day, when the NIO stock price was trading in the $60+ range, their quarter delivery numbers were about 17,000, about 20,000. They're doing that monthly now, month over month over month. And so the reality of the lack of momentum, plus perhaps all the predatory shorting, these things absolutely play into the short-term stock price action, and sentiment, of course, also matters. So I have no idea what to expect into the end of the year, especially without seeing the most recent FTD data. But I won't be shocked if we end up seeing some spikes. And the reality is we don't need to see spikes for the stock price to be negatively impacted, or especially if there are predatory shorts with the low trade volume, it is easier for them. They don't even have to spend as much money or take as much effort to push the price down wherever they want it. So that's just my thought. And so I wanted to share it. Also, and in line with my big picture long-term view, the three major or initial growth phases for NIO, as I identified them several years ago. The first one is market awareness. And I had a great comment from Fluffing, and I pinned it in a video over the weekend. In fact, I'll cue that video so that you can check it out, because this was kind of a report from being in China and talking to people about the different brands. And for example, they consider Tesla to be low tech. And there's also a shift, I think, especially with the younger buyers, into the sort of wanting to support the local brands. And of course, it's got to help that the technology and the smart EVs are so good across the brands there in China. But I think one of the takeaways was NIO is considered expensive. And so if that's outside of the price range for a lot of folks, that makes Onvo and even Firefly, when those come out, even more not just important, but perhaps pivotal for continuing that market awareness of the brand inside of China and then outside of China as well. And then profitability, I don't want to get my expectations up, although there were some things that we didn't hear about. Like, for example, in the last earnings, we never heard anything about the monies, the royalties, any payments received from 4/7. And so there are some things out there that NIO really hasn't told us about. Maybe we'll hear about that in this earnings call, November 20th. It's going to be fun to see and kind of listen in on what William Lee has to say. I might even reach out to one of the analysts and pose a question, see if they'll ask it. But I got to think on that. I was thinking about that the other day. Anyway, drop it in the comments. Let me know if there are any questions you all want answered, because I'd like to hear from others and also see what they're thinking. Short term, anybody's guess, especially with, again, the simplest indicator is Alibaba. If Alibaba is continuing to be sort of depressed, versus or relative to its very profitable earnings that we're probably going to get here later this week, then it's just not a shock to see other Chinese stocks down. And NIO, I think those of us who have been here for a while are not surprised to see it heavily targeted from the side of short sellers. So in any event, have a great day. Thanks for sticking around to the end, if you, in fact, did stick around to the end. I'll see y'all again very soon.